Awesome. You guys made it back. Okay, so I'm here so we can keep talking about Relationships 101, or Dating 101. Before I go into the second rule, I just want to kind of talk about a couple of ideas, okay? The first idea, when I keep talking or mentioning this thing about deficit, or I mention wrong belief system about myself, I just want to expand a little bit on that, which is usually our belief system that we have came from a context, and that context is the family of origin that we were raised in. And out of that family, we picked up a kinesthetic sense of what we believe life's like, what we think life's like, whether life's fair, whether people are fair, trust issues, and a whole variety of other things. And a lot of when we're trying to navigate into relationships, it will be triggered when we start moving towards connecting up with another person. So I want to kind of talk about a thought that how we kind of define whether or not a person is carrying their family system still within your body. In other words, this dysfunctionality, wrong perception of yourself, is still within your body emotionally, and it's running subconsciously usually, is if you have thoughts in your head with emotions attached that you feel internally of accusation, condemnation, negative declaration, judgment, and guilt, it's more than likely not from you. You got it from somewhere. Okay, so I'll say that again. If you have thoughts in your head with emotions attached that you feel internally of accusation, condemnation, negative declaration, judgment, and guilt, it's not of you. What do you mean, Leon? I hear it all the time in my head, and I feel it all the time in my body. I said, well, how we know it's not of us is because nobody wakes up in the morning wanting to judge themselves without mercy, condemn themselves, and the whole list of negativity that comes in, and then have a cup of coffee and say, and I'll put a big heap of guilt on me and walk through the day. Who wants to feel that way? Who wants to wake up in life having that in their bodies? None of us do. So you have to get it from somewhere. You just don't have it. It's kind of funny when we do our second course on championing your wounded child. We usually bring in babies, toddlers, and preschoolers. And the babies will usually be about a month old in that. So I'll hold a baby up like this, and I'll say to the class, does this baby have worth? And somebody in the class inevitably will say, well, no. And we'll all look at them and they'll kind of go like, well, yeah, I mean, yes, they do. Okay, well, the next question is, why does a baby have worth? Does the baby have worth because it's got the latest fashion wear on? Does the baby have worth because it's got a great job? Does the baby have worth because all the other babies in the nursery want to hang out with it because it's the most popular baby in the nursery? Well, no, the baby doesn't have worth for any of those reasons. The baby has worth for one reason, because it just is. And there's, if any of you have had kids, there's something about a baby. It's terrifying, it's scary, it's all that kind of stuff. But the thing about it, it has worth because it's from you. And out of that worth, that being from your body, you look into its camera lens, and you go, googly boogly googly boogly, oh, jalega baba izaba. And why? Because to you it's very important as a parent that this is your child. This is your one and only child, if it's your first. And there's great worth in just being. Out of the 112 billion people who have walked this planet, you're the only you who's you. We will never meet another you. You will never meet, no one will ever meet another Leon. I have worth because I'm the only one, the only imprint, the only person that is a Leon that will ever walk this planet. And in that, I better make sure it's me living it and not my guilt, accusation, negative declaration, and all this other crap that most of us are carrying inside ourselves. Because it's going to just rob you of your freedom of your life. Okay, saying that, I want to move on to the second idea. When the Greeks came up in philosophy, the origin of mankind, according to the Greeks, the gods came down and they split man into two separate parts, and that would be the male and the female. And from that day forth, we start looking around for this other half that has been split off from ourselves, which is outside of ourselves. And you probably have heard the term when people introduce their significant other, oh, this is Susan, she's my better half, or this is Bill, he's my better half. Now, the problem with that is a half times a half makes a quarter. It doesn't make a whole person. And if we're spending most of our lives going out there trying to find our deficit in somebody else, it's not going to work. It's our deficit, and it's my deficit. And I have to figure out for myself, when I'm going to be with somebody, is it because of my deficit, or is it because I really want to be next and connected with somebody, which is really about community and relationship? Rule number 2 is, I must have the other person's best interest. Now, why is that important? Well, it's important because I don't want somebody to be with me out of codependency needs. In other words, my insecurity, my deficit, my perception about myself, if I have them in my life, everything's going to be okay. I can't project, a lot of people, if you never dated, or when you were dating when you're younger, think of it this way. When you were dating when you were younger, and you hadn't had much dating practice, so you've had years of practicing in your head what you thought dating would be like, what thoughts of fantasy thinking of relationships would look like this, and this is how I would act in a relationship. Now, if any of you have been actually in a relationship, the fantasy idea about what a relationship is far from close to being what a relationship truly looks like when you're actually in one. And the key part about having the other person's best interest is, and what we try to say is, we try to promote this concept that's called protecting the other's solitude. In other words, you give them their space, you protect their space, you protect their personal interests, you protect what they love to do. You give them the space, the freedom to actually have their own reality so that they can continue to grow and be the best person that they were meant to be. I came into this world to be me, for that is why I've come. I've come to be Leon. I have to confess, most of my life I haven't been Leon. I've been doing the act of Leon because I'm worried about what other people think. That's judgment. I'm worried about what people might say. That's accusation. And if I can't be the real me, and I can't allow another person to be the real them, then I can't see them for who they are. And what ends up happening is I won't have their best interest. My emotional deficit of myself will try to manipulate it in some way so that that person will stay with me. If I love them enough, surely they'll stay with me. If I give all of myself to them, surely they'll stay with me. But the motivation behind that really isn't about for their best interest. It's really about for my emotional well-balanced. Because I have such a deficit of emotionally that I feel about myself, I try to keep them with me by overdoing stuff. So in that rule, I must always have the person's best interest. That is a true, solid fact. But there's a second part to that rule that's very important. Not at my emotional expense. So if I'm in a relationship with somebody and it seems like I'm giving and giving and giving and giving and giving, there's something going on there. And what's usually going on there is I'm trying to woo them and win them over. And that's my emotional expense. Am I trying to woo them over so I'm worried about that they're going to leave me? And what we're usually afraid of is this thing called conflict with somebody. I want to just share something with you. The biggest times of intimacy with anybody is going to be in conflict. What we're usually afraid of, because of our past experiences, we've never seen this thing called conflict resolution. In other words, when conflict has happened, the resolution of it ends up being the reward for understanding that conflict is not about a negative thing. Conflict's really about working out something. And in working out something, you get your boundary and you get your space, and plus you understand the other person who really does know you, who really does love you, and really does care for you, wants to be with you. We get it. None of us are perfect. I don't know anyone who's perfect. I know people look perfect on the outside, but if you talk to them for 5 minutes, they probably fess up and say, I have no idea what I'm doing. I'm doing the best I can. Right? So the second rule of relationships is I must always have the other person's best interest, which means I give them the soil, the permission, and I protect their right to have their freedom from me. And in our culture, again, it's a lot different than it used to be a few years back, where we had courtship and there was a time that took place where we got to meet the person, see the person, make a call on that person, see them in their natural element, see them not with the act of themselves, see them when their guards are down. We don't have that much in our culture, Western culture. What we usually have is just the opposite. It's very quick. Everything's very quick. Technology is quick. Thinking process is quick. These videos are fairly quick because that's the way our society is. And we meet somebody, and then usually we're in bed with them, and by the time that's happened, that connection that happens when you're sleeping with somebody, it makes it tougher to break up with them because you've already made this biological or physiological energy connection with them, and it gets very hurtful for both people on both sides. So the idea that I must always have the other person's best interest really is about having their best interest. I don't want to manipulate them to keep them in the relationship. I don't want to control them to keep them in the relationship. I want them to see me for who I am so that I can see them for who they are, which is who you want to meet to begin with, and develop a relationship out of that. Okay, so on that note, we'll catch you on the third rule, which is see the person for who they are, not who you're hoping them to be. Catch you guys in a bit.